Some time ago, I received a very special invitation, an invitation very few people ever get. It was the invitation of the paramount spiritual leader of the Maasai people in Kenya, Eastern Africa, to come and visit him and visit the so-called holy forest of the Maasai. He rarely receives Western visitors at all. I was lucky because my friend and travel companion grew up among the Maasai and arranged the visit. It took us 2 days in our four-wheel drive vehicle to drive from the capital Nairobi to the Loita Hills in the center of Kenya, where the Holy Forest is located. Just before we arrived, my friend stopped the car in a clearing in the forest. He said, "We have to explore this swamp over here to make sure that we can get across with the car, that it doesn't get stuck in the mud. So let's go on foot and check it out." We did so. When we came back to the car and wanted to get back in, there was a sudden loud noise and a huge rhinoceros broke out of the trees in front of us. I was petrified. My friend said, "Stand completely still." He's an experienced traveler. He knows what to do in situations like this. Now, you may know that a rhinoceros is very nearsighted to the point of being almost blind. It also weighs a couple of tons. Once it's at full speed, it's very difficult for the animal to change its course. So we stood there as it came towards us. At the very last moment, we stepped aside. My friend pulled me aside. The huge animal rushed straight past us, so close that I could actually smell it, and it vanished into the forest behind us. We walked back to the car. I was shaking all over. My hands, my feet, my everything. We drove on, arrived at the compound of Mokompo, who is a traditional African leader. Can you show the photo, please? Here he is, dressed in animal skins with bracelets, colorful robes, got paint on his face, got amulets, all the usual accoutrements of a spiritual leader in Africa. After we'd had something to eat, Mokompo said, "Well, maybe now it's time to visit the Holy Forest, because that's what you came for after all. And you passed the test." I looked at him. What do you mean? Which test? He only smiled mysteriously and said, "Well, my friend, rhinos are very dangerous animals, aren't they?" That was a moment of real magic for me. Had Mokompo so much power that he could actually send a rhino across a distance of maybe 40 kilometers to test me, to see if I had the courage, if I was worthy to visit the holy forest of the Maasai? Or was the whole rhino even a figment of my own imagination? And had he implanted it in my brain, again to test me? I'll never know, because I didn't dare ask. Now, the holy forest of the Maasai is a very special place. It's an ancient, intact ecosystem. It's got lakes, it's got rivers, it's got trees, it's got meadows. And it never dries out. Mokompo said, as we entered, it serves two purposes for us. One purpose is a very practical one. In times of drought, our herders can bring their cows to the holy forest, which is a large area. It's not like a little copse. No, it's got maybe a diameter of 50 kilometers. And then the cows can drink and they can eat and they can survive. Now, cows are crucial for the Maasai. They're almost as important as their fellow humans. A cow will only be slaughtered in times of absolute need, in times of hunger. Normally, they're allowed to live with the humans to a ripe old age till they die of old age. So cows are revered. The second purpose of the Holy Forest, Mokompo said, is maybe even more important for us because it's ceremonial. People come here from far away, from maybe Mount Kilimanjaro, 500 kilometers away, because the area of the Maasai is large, to attend certain ceremonies that may heal them, certain initiations, and other sacred practices that we have been following for hundreds of years, and I oversee most of them. Yeah, by this time, I can see some of your faces. You may be wondering, why is this guy telling me about this holy forest? You know, what's the whole point? Well, I'll tell you very briefly. It's about your survival. And it's about your survival. And it's about your survival. And it's about my survival. It's about everybody's survival here. But I'm going to come back to that. Right now, I just want to show you a brief video that my friend Jan Dries Groenendijk, my travel companion, on that occasion shot in the Holy Forest. It's an initiation of young men who have been warriors for a certain period and now become adults, which means they have the right to marry, to build a house, and to start their own herd of cattle. Can we start the video, please? Okay, yeah, that's more or less enough to give you an impression. The actual film is 90 minutes long, but I won't bore you with that. I guess you saw the forest, you saw the young men, and I think you can tell from these images that there is a sacred ceremony going on. And for them, it's very important. Now, I would like to transport you in your mind, in your imagination, to a completely different part of the world. Friesland, the north of the Netherlands, not far from here. As most of you probably know, it's the center of dairy production. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cows there in huge barns. And 1 year ago, my wife and I, there she is, we moved from Amsterdam to Friesland. Quite a transition, I can tell you. Quite a transition in many ways. Not long after we arrived there, we were invited by a local farmer who was living in the area to come and have a look at their farm, their dairy farm. The farm is owned by a couple in their 40s called Jenny and Hilke. And Jenny said she was going to show us around the barn where the cows were. So there we were. We saw the barn, we saw all the modern machinery, the milk robots, and about 200 cows were walking around in the stable, resting, eating, shitting, because cows shit a lot, as you probably know. And I asked Jenny, so they live here all the time? Yeah, she said, day and night. So I said, well, when's the happy month when they can go out to pasture, to eat the green grass, to enjoy the sunshine and the wind and the beautiful Frisian landscape? She said, that time is never. I said, what? Yeah, we're a business here. It's cheaper for us to bring the food to the cows than to bring the cows to the food. Now, Jenny knows what she's talking about. She studied agricultural economics and she teaches 1 day a week at a dairy farm college in the north of the Netherlands. So she knows what she's talking about. And therefore, I put my next question, which is probably a more pressing question, and it's a big issue in politics at the moment as well. I asked her, how do you feel about the fact that the European Union and the Dutch government are pressurizing dairy farmers to reduce their output of manure, of nitrogen, of methane, and so on? Which means less cows, right? Which means less milk, which means less income for you. She looked again at me like I was some stupid guy from the West, which I probably am anyway, and said, well, you know, we used to milk our cows twice a day. And what we've simply done, we've reduced the amount of cows, and the ones that are left, we milk them 3 times a day. You see that cow over there? She pointed at a cow standing a little bit aside in a corner. It looked kind of old and tired. That's cow 132. Over its lifetime, it's given us 100,000 liters of milk. I calculated, not quickly, my maths are never very good. That's 100,000 euros in the supermarket, right? That's a lot of money. So I said, wow, you must be grateful to number 132. I guess she can now soon look forward to a happy old age in a grassy meadow. Jenny looked at me again like I was a stupid guy. She said, no, it's going to the butcher's next week. That's far more economical, my friend. That evening, I went home, we went home, wiser but sadder. I felt sad for myself. I felt sad for cow 132, who was probably going to die the next week in some horrible way. I believe they electrocute them or put a pin through their head, something horrible like that. And I felt very sad for the cruel human race that I apparently belong to. I kept a straight face when I was there, but the Maasai would probably have broken down and cried. Now, like I told you, for the Maasai, and as Mokompo told me, the spiritual leader, nature and humankind are one. They can't be separated. He told me, we derive all our power, all our spiritual power from nature, and if nature would die, we would die. We are one. One can't go without the other. However, in the West, apparently we have come to believe differently. We have drawn a boundary, literally a boundary, between ourselves and nature. That's where I come to the theme of today, crossing boundaries. There's that boundary running there. And we consider nature to be something to combat. It's like an enemy. And to exploit. The Netherlands, again, are a very good case in point. First of all, we need to combat nature. We spend billions of euros every year to stop the waters from rising so high that the entire country would disappear into the sea. More importantly, we feel we have the right to exploit nature to the max. If you know that in the Dutch bio-industry, and then I'm talking about animals that never see the light of day, chickens, pigs, cows, etc. 1.75 million animals are killed every day, not every week or month, no, every day, for profit and mostly for export. If you know that we use X amount of terrible pesticides to poison our lands so that we can maximize our crops, our potatoes, our onions, our beautiful tulip pool that we are so famous for, again, to export for profit. And if you know that the use of these pesticides has caused the biodiversity in this little country to drop to 15% of what it was half a century ago. That's 15, not 50, 15%. Then you know we are heading for disaster. And that's why I talk about survival here. I'm not talking about other stuff. I'm talking about survival of all of us, of humankind in general. Now, I'd like to round off this talk by making a comparison with climate change. You may be surprised because, geez, climate change, that's like a really boring subject. We know all about that, don't we? However, in the early 90s, which I experienced very fully, all the proof was already there 30 years ago. The scientists had all the proof that climate change was happening, was going to accelerate, and why. But nobody was listening to them. Almost nobody. Most people were laughing at them. They didn't want to believe it. Now we are 30 years on, and everybody in the street, whoever you talk to, they know climate change is here. We know about the floods, we know about the storms, we know about the fires in Los Angeles and so on. Entire nations are disappearing into the ocean because of climate change. And politics has only started acting, big industry has only started taking steps to change something about climate change because the general public has become convinced that something is seriously wrong and their own house might go up into flames or get engulfed by the water next week. Therefore, we need to do the same for the subject I want to talk about today, which is the fact that we are killing our animals and we are poisoning nature. We need to make the general public aware of the fact that this is an urgent matter. We don't have 30 years this time. We didn't have 30 years that time, and look what happened now. And we don't have 30 years this time. Only when we mobilize the general opinion of the man and the woman in the street, of the general public, and make them aware that we should not and that we have no right to torture and kill all these animals and to poison the earth and to create a situation where the biodiversity is going to drop to zero. And as you probably know, Einstein said, when the bees disappear from the earth, mankind will follow within 4 years. Only when we mobilize the general public to understand this, we may be able to save the earth. That's where you come in. All of you. You and you and you and you. And I. It's no longer enough to separate your plastic at home and put it in a bag and put that little bag outside your door. It's no longer enough to separate your waste paper and put it in another little bag and put it outside your door. And it's no longer enough to separate your kitchen refuse and put it in a third bag and put it outside your door and then go and sit back and wait for the council to take it away and solve the problem somehow. That's not enough anymore. So, I'm here to ask you to go out and talk to people. Show courage. They won't like it. They'll be annoyed. They say, hey man, I've got other stuff to do, especially making money, usually. But you must do it. You must show moral courage. You must show moral ambition, as the writer Rutger Bregman, who's now very popular, calls his new book. Let us all show moral ambition to ourselves, to each other. Spread the word. Make sure that because of that, the general public begins to understand the disaster that is developing, but that they're unaware of at this time. And that therefore politics and big industry start moving. They did it when they became aware of climate change by investing big in the energy transition, and now they must do it again. So go out there, show moral courage. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your friends, you owe it to the Maasai, you owe it to the plants and the trees, you back there. You owe it to the animals, you owe it to the bees especially, and you owe it to Mother Earth, who is our mother. Thank you very much.